This is Module 5 of the Compliance Monitoring Data Portal training materials. In this module, we cover the entry of composite samples and results using the web forms in CMDP. There are three ways to submit samples and results into the CMDP, the Compliance Monitoring Data Portal, in order to report them to your primacy agency. One, upload the sample information as an XML file using web services. Two, manually upload the sample information in an XML file, and that XML file can be generated using an Excel template that is available in CMDP. And three, entering the information directly into the CMDP using the data entry screens that are part of the application. In this training module, the third method will be presented and will focus on the data entry screens for composite samples and results, as I mentioned. We covered the entry of chemical, radionuclide, and microbial samples and results as individual samples in Module 4. After logging into the CMDP, there are 6 steps to add a composite sample. We're going to look at each one of those steps. After logging into the CMDP, the home page appropriate for your role is presented. In this case, I'm functioning as a private lab CMDP administrator. From this page, you can, to enter a new job and to enter samples for that job, you go to the Drinking Water Sample Jobs page. On this page is a listing of existing jobs, and you can see the job IDs here along the left column. Now I could go in and enter additional samples and additional data into an existing job if that job is in a status other than accepted by state or submitted to state. So for instance here, draft with certifier, draft with preparer. I could go into either one of those jobs and add samples, including composite samples. But for this presentation, what we're going to do is create a new job, and we're going to enter a composite sample for a chem, and then secondly, we're going to at least start the entry of a composite sample for radionuclides. To do that, once you've gotten to this Drinking Water Sample Job tab, you click on the Create New Job. This is one of the other methods you can move in data, which is one of the things I mentioned in the intro. But we're going to enter a group of samples using the forms in CMDP. And so I'm going to click on this icon. They ask you to give a description for the job. You will want to do some thinking about the job descriptions you give so that when you return, they help you identify your records more easily. Although you can see there's a lot of other information that's stored with any job that you create. So you'll want to do some thinking about that. I'm not going to do a whole lot of thinking. I'm just going to call it Training Module 5. When you click OK, a new job has been created and you are brought to what's called the Job Summary View. The Job Summary View has 5 tabs, as you can see. 6 tabs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 of those are used for entering or reviewing sample data. So the sample result, operational data, composite samples. And of course, they're all blank right now because I've created a new job. The other 3 are supplemental pieces for a job. We cover those in other modules. So my objective here is to enter composite samples. To enter the first composite sample, I click on, first of all, I go to the Composite Sample tab, and then I click on the Add button. The composite sample form is presented. At the very top is where I start entering the information from, of course, from the form that you'd received. I don't have an actual form in front of me, so I'm just going to create a number. The composite date then is important, obviously, and you enter that from your information. Sample volume, if appropriate and reported, you enter that. And then the lab that did the compositing. Notice on the right end here is a checkbox. I would check that if I was going to be, or if I was entering a composite sample for radionuclides. In this first example, I'm going to focus on a chemical composite. Once I've entered that information, I can click on Save to make sure that I've gotten everything I need. That's always a good idea, because if sometimes when you go down into another grid and click on a button, you might have an error that you have to address, and you can't always, sometimes it's easy to miss the error message, which, by the way, would show up at the very top, just like this piece of information saying that the record was successfully saved. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start entering my individual samples. So I click on the Add button. The composites I'm adding are all from systems that serve less than 3,300. So I'm going to go ahead and start entering the data, and I'm going to be entering samples from across 3 water systems. My first water system is Beaver City Water System. Notice the drop down is long, and instead of scrolling all the way through that, I'm going to use the filtering capability to get my list down to the one I need. And there it is. I typed all the way through city, and it brought me to the Beaver City Water System. I know it's treatment plant 01, the Baker Canyon Spring Chlorinator. And so I'm going to go down and find that and select it. And the sampling point is the entry point sampling point. Sample ID that I'm going to use for this individual sample is 01. Notice you can also tab to fields, and I just did that. I'm going to enter R and select the routine. And the collection date on this, I'm going to say was a week earlier, so 10/08. And notice you also have to select the lab. Since I'm logged in as a lab, I only have one showing up in my drop-down. After I've entered that first record, I can hit the Save button to make sure everything's good, and click on the Add button to go to my second record. The second set of samples are also from Beaver City Water System. There's 2 entry points there that they sampled. Oops, let's try that again. There we go. And the second entry point is called sampling station. So let's find that. There it is. That's the entry point sampling point. And I'm going to use this as the sample ID for that individual sample, but 02. Again, it's a routine. It also was collected on 08, and lab has received that sample. I'll go ahead and save that. And I'm going to add one more before I move on. Of course, typically you wouldn't always have 5, but generally you're going to have pretty close to 5. But I'm going to go with 3. I'm going to go to my second water system, which is Milford City Water. And there it is. And the sampling, of course, that didn't populate anything because I hadn't selected my facility first. The sampling point for this, the facility for this one is the Mineral Mountains Chlorinator. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that. And the sampling point. Routine again. And I could go on to enter 2 more, but I'm going to cut this a little short. I'm going to end there. Next thing I want to do is go in and add the results for this composite sample. As with individual samples and results, I have two ways I can enter results. I can enter them individually. So if I had a composite for nitrate as an example, or a composite for arsenic, or I had very few results for the composite, I might elect to go by using this add approach. If, on the other hand, I had results for a large set like the VOCs, I may instead want to use the add to grid approach. Notice that I expanded this area called set default values for sample results table. In here then, let's say I'm doing a VOC group, a set of 21. I'd want to pick the analyte group. Not only, though, do you need to pick the analyte group when you're using this approach, but you also have to pick the individual analytes in the group. So right now, what's showing is all 21 of the VOCs, but in order to select them all, I need to check that box at the very top. And then I can go through the process of entering the information that is common to at least the majority. So for instance, if a couple of these were detected, but 19 of them were not detected, I'd probably use this approach and then go back and update those two. And you can see then you can go on through and set a number of these things, including the analysis start date and analysis start time. Notice this analyzing lab ID. This is intended for the situation where the samples were sent to one lab, and that lab sent at least part of or the entire sample to another lab for analysis. In this case, that didn't occur, so I'm not going to select another one. I'm going to go ahead and enter analysis start date, which started on the same day that it was composited, and analysis start time. I'm tabbing over to that field. That started in the morning. Notice it automatically adds the colon to the time. Reporting limit is common for the VOCs, and so I want to enter that. And then, of course, standard deviation doesn't apply. I could additionally enter analysis completion date and time if I have that available to me. Once you've entered the information that you want for all the results, you click on the Add to Grid button and give it a little bit of time. It's going to generally be faster than that, but for our situation here, it took just a little bit. You can see that by the scroll bar that it's added a lot of rows to that bottom section. We're going to go ahead and just take a look at the fact that it's entered all the results with the same information. And now, if I did have a detect, I would need to go back in and update any particular record that should have been updated. But in this example, I didn't have any detects, and so I'm going to go ahead and save this record. Information successfully saved. I'd close it, and now you can see that composite sample is listed. Now I'm going to walk through, at least get started on walking through adding a radionuclide composite. That is to say, one that's collected over 4 periods, generally quarters. So again, I'm going to click on the Add button to get it initiated. The same composite sample results page is presented. Start to enter the composite information, starting with the composite ID, then the composite date. Again, I'm going to go with 10/15. The lab, and of course this one's defaulting to the lab because I'm logged in as a user for this lab, and this is my only lab, so it can default that. And then this time I'm going to check that for radionuclides. Notice nothing about the screen changed. But when I start adding the information for the individual samples, you'll notice one difference. This one is, I'm going to go ahead and enter again for the Beaver City water system. Oh, well, it's right there. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. And I'm going to go ahead and enter this information for that Baker Canyon Springs chlorinator. Treatment plant 01. Sample ID. Sample type is routine again. Collection date. It's going to be, the first one was collected in the first quarter, and they did a good job of spreading it out, so they collected this one in January, on January 20th, 2016. Again, I need to enter the lab for each one of these. I'm going to save this at this point since I haven't done that yet. And it's saved successfully. I'm going to go ahead now and add the second quarter sample. Now here's the one difference. When I check the 4 radionuclides, the location is carried forward and disabled because the expectation is that you're entering this under the requirements of the radionuclides rule, under which, of course, the samples are collected over 4 periods, but all at the same location. This one was collected on the 20th of April. And that lab again. I'm going to add my third quarter sample. Collected approximately 3 months later. And finally, again, you don't have to necessarily click save between each one, but I've gotten to where I kind of like to do it that way. I'm going to add then the final one, the fourth quarter sample. And now I'm ready to enter the individual samples and results. You have the same ability to use the add to grid and add several results at one time. This time, however, I'm going to just do individual adds because there were 2 of the 3 had detects. And so I would proceed to enter each one. So this is going to be one where they did a gross alpha analysis. I know 4002, and so I just type that in. We're going to say it was detected, but at a fairly low level. PCI and the standard deviation. Reporting limit. I'm not sure what the reporting limit is, so I just picked one there. Sorry, I didn't check that. Method. The list of methods is restricted to the particular analyte that you've picked. So when you are adding results this way, you generally want to select the analyte first because that does at least control a little bit of some of the subsequent columns in that row. And I don't know a good method to use, so I'm just going to pick one. And then analysis start date. They started the analysis the same day that they composited it. And they started it a little in the afternoon, so this gives you a flavor of how to enter an afternoon. So that's 3:33. I could do the analysis completion date and time. Same thing applies on the analyzing lab ID. you'd only enter that if it was actually analyzed at a different lab than the one indicated as the compositing lab. Now I just tab to save that and click on the add to add another result. I'm going to go ahead and add a result for radium-226. And this one's a no detect. So notice that the result and UOM fields are disabled. The reporting limit, though, can still be and should be reported. And again, the list is restricted to those methods appropriate for radium-226. This one started a little earlier in the day. And now I just hit the enter key, and then to complete it, I'll click on the save key. Information is saved successfully. So when I close this, now I have 2 sample records that I've added with multiple results for each. Notice one thing, when I come into this job, if I click on the sample results tab, those individual samples that I entered as part of the composite do show up here. But generally, your best bet is to go into those then this way, because those results were saved with the composite sample, not with the individual sample results. That concludes our presentation on how to enter composite samples into CMDP using the web forms.